Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Rhonda, is this the first time on the 9:30 call for you?
No, I think I did the 9:30 call once
Okay, phew.
once before.
Well, it's great to see folks. We're so happy to have Rhonda Alexander with us. I'll give a quick budget update. So yesterday, the Massachusetts House of Representatives started their budget debate. If you can watch it live stream, I'll put the link in. You can continue watching today. And what they do is they consolidate the amendments by topic. So yesterday, one of the first ones they did was local aid and education. And so they took all the amendments that were filed in those topic areas and boiled it down to one amendment that they passed. And unfortunately, many of the amendments that we had advocated for were not included in that amendment. And that's not surprising just because I think as we're hearing, people are, the House is depending on what's happening in the wide world and the context, I think they're being cautious. So now the process well, the House will continue to debate and then it will move to the Senate. So that will be the chance that we'll have again for advocacy. So we will have another advocacy message for folks to do, and we'll keep you posted throughout the process. So Rhonda, welcome back to the 9:30 call. The first question we ask everybody is for you to tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be in your current role. And I think you have slides to do that.
Yeah, I can share those. Give me just a quick minute to make sure I'm sharing the right thing.
We always say this is the hardest part of it all. We can solve every problem, but to get slides up is tough.
It happens.
It
It's
does.
it's all good. I am ready to go. Let me
Great.
just hit the right button.
That's right.
All right. Awesome. So, good morning. It's so lovely to see you all and to be here. As Amy mentioned, my name is Ronda Alexander, and I currently am the founder and president of Global Reach Consulting. Um, and so I won't go into who I am, but essentially, I like to work with groups, teams, and individuals to align and leverage their resources towards a particular goal. And so how I got to this work, although it was a long time ago, it actually came through high school. I went to a really innovative high school in Metro Detroit, which was inside of a museum, and it was all about hands-on teaching and learning. And that led me to working for an organization called Ford Next Generation Learning, right out of grad school, which was a part of Ford Motor Company Fund, the philanthropic arm of Ford Motor Company. And that work was all about holding space for interdisciplinary teams um, to work together to make high school more relevant, engaging, and realistic. And those interdisciplinary teams not only consisted of helping teachers come out of their individual classrooms, so math, science, English, and social studies, and working together around a particular career or industry theme, but also bringing together educators, community leaders, and business and industry folks to talk about what does education look like. And so a lot of that where I've learned so much in that space was around holding space for groups who don't seem to have anything in common to work together. And I worked with school districts across the country for about 9 years. And then I shifted to United Way for Southeastern Michigan, doing very similar work, but focused in Detroit. I was seeing all this great work happening all over the country. I was like, I really want to see it happening in my community and see teachers and business partners working together. Um, in this way. And then that led me to the amazing Vital Village Networks here in Massachusetts, and really, I think, elevating my skills in my practice, working with coalitions and communities around health equity and child well-being, and doing that work through the lens of community leadership. So that's how I got to here today.
And for those of you who are longtime Strategies for Children connectors, Rhonda also was the facilitator for the stewardship team for the strategies for the early childhood agenda. And so we worked very closely with Rhonda there. And then we loved that experience so much that we worked with Rhonda on our strategic planning kind of refresh update that we started in December, worked through January and February. And we just were so excited to work with Rhonda to have the process that you laid out for us. And we really appreciate that Rhonda knew who we were as an organization. So it kind of cut out that whole getting to know you beginning part of our process. So, Rhonda, do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing now? And we can share a little bit more about our strategic plan too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've recently stepped away from my role at Vital Village Networks, and I'm focused on a consulting practice around facilitation. So holding space for, as I mentioned earlier, teams, groups, and eventually individuals to achieve their goals using collaborative, human-centered, participatory approaches. And so what you see on the screen now is sort of the foundation of my facilitation practice. Um, Back in 2011, I was introduced to a method in a group called the Technology of Participation, um, which essentially is very much what it sounds like. It's bringing groups together, but in a way to sort of think and talk and work together, that uplifts and sort of centers every voice in the room. So every person engaged has a voice, has something to contribute, and sort of holds space for that, through thinking about what are the facts, how do we feel about them, what does this mean to our work, and what actions are we going to take. And then around the same time, I was also introduced to human-centered design and had the opportunity of spending some time at the D school or design school at Stanford. And again, that process is around really understanding who is your user, what's their why, defining the challenge, sort of brainstorming around that and coming up with solutions together. So that's sort of the foundation of my facilitation practice, whether I'm working with individuals or communities of practice, on strategic planning, action planning, retreats, and et cetera. And so just a little bit about the process that we work through with the strategies for children's team on their strategic planning. It's sort of, again, it's grounded in the technology of participation. And so it's really interactive. I often tell folks, like, I'm not writing a strategic plan for you. You're doing all of the work. And at the end of the process, you'll have a cooked meal, but you get to plate it how you want to. And so in this process, we sort of start at the center of this spiral, focusing on the present and thinking about our preparation and design, really understanding the team, your goals, developing a strategic planning focus question. And then we move outward in that spiral towards a practical vision. So we're looking 3 to 5 years out and asking, doing some visionary thinking and sort of asking, what if, right? And so once we've had the opportunity to think about where is it that we want to go, we come back to the present and look at underlying contradictions or blocks and barriers, sort of what's getting in the way, what's blocking us from getting to that practical vision. And then once we sort of understand the things and really name and are really honest about the things that are blocking us from moving towards the vision, then we begin to work on strategic thinking through strategic directions. So thinking about how do we address those blocks and barriers and move us towards our vision? What are some innovative, substantial actions that will address those blocks and move us toward our vision? And so that's looking about 2 years out. And then the spiral sort of expands and we focus on the first year, right? So we know where we're going, what's getting in the way, what are our strategies for getting there. Then we talk about the first year of focused implementation. So how are we going to do this? So it's very detailed, action oriented, time bound. And that's sort of the end of the overall process. And then we can check in quarterly to see how are things going, what's working, what did we learn, and what can we shift. And so I'll pause there. I can stop sharing my screen. Amy, if you want to talk a little bit more,
Sure.
have questions, or folks have questions.
Donna added to the chat. I love everything about this. Um, And Titus, I see you. Good morning. And maybe let's talk a little bit and then we can share kind of where we ended up. And I think if anyone ever has been involved kind of in a strategic plan, there's kind of a classic way that you might think about it. And this experience was totally different from that. I think even the language around underlying contradictions and what's blocking you is such a good frame. It was so helpful for us. And one of the things that we figured out is we now have language to describe the work. Because when we went into this strategic plan refresh, we kept saying we want our language to reflect what we're actually doing. We have a 25-year history at Strategies for Children. So the process that we went through, and we did staff, we involved our board of directors, we did virtual, we did in person. So it kind of touched all the different parts of how we interact, and it was so engaging. And Rhonda's kind of steady, it's all going to be okay attitude and leadership really, really helped us. And so I think, Rhonda, when you're working, and I think the other thing that was different was Rhonda saying in the very beginning, like, I'm not going to write your strategic plan for you. That you are going to, we'll have all the pieces and you're going to plate it. It was such a visual kind of cue of the work that we had to do. Rhonda, as you're working with groups, I think many of us have been hearing about strategic planning and all this for, there was a very trendiness of what folks were doing. And you were very transparent and said like it's the process. Like we have the process, we have the map. Can you talk a little bit about as you've watched groups, and I know you've worked with all different kinds of groups, where do they get hung up? Where do they have their aha moments? Like what is that like to be the facilitator?
Yeah, I think what I have found is usually in underlying contradictions and figuring out what the blocks are. Because often when we step into, okay, we know where we want to go, the vision already lives in the room, it lives in the group. So it shouldn't feel like it's some big drastic thing. And that's just sort of solidifying and bringing it together. But when we get to underlying contradictions, often the language is, well, we lack this, we don't have that. And what I'm asking you to think about is not what's not there, but what is there. Like, what are you participating in that is blocking you? And I think the metaphor I talk about is, your garden, right? If you go out and you're in your garden and you're watering your flowers, and all of a sudden the water stops, you don't say, "Oh no, I lack water." Like you try and figure out like what is the block? Is there a kink in the hose? Was the hose cut? So what is actually there? Someone is standing on the hose. Someone has twisted the hose. So not, oh no, we don't have water. So I think that's often an aha moment for groups and naming that. And once they can say, all right, well, this is what it is, then we can think about solutions to move towards it.
I think the other thing that was amazing to be part of was kind of how quickly the process went. That it wasn't like a 6 month process. It was pretty intense.
Mm.
It was kind of required everyone's kind of buy-in, like we're going to spend this time together. We're going to be engaged and active participants. Can you talk about the benefit? And so now we are in our implementation and we meet once a week, and use our slides that Rhonda kind of set up for us. And to get to that year one, like what are we going to do? And I think one of our underlying contradictions is we sometimes try to be all things to all people. And so how do we start reframing our work through this implementation phase so that we're kind of addressing that and keeping that in the front of their mind? So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think also people think like it takes years or a year process to engage to do a strategic plan.
Yeah, I think what I really enjoy about approaching strategic directions or strategic planning from this way is that it is quick. And also, our world is constantly changing. Every day, there's something new. And I think folks don't necessarily have the luxury of taking 6, 12 months to develop a plan. And so it's intense. Um, but then you walk away with like, what's going to happen in the next 90 days? Like, this is what we're doing in the next 3 months. And here's who's responsible for it. Here are those actions. Here they are in terms of being prioritized, and a plan for coming together. And I think um, doing a plan in that way, doing it quickly allows you to be nimble and pivot very quickly where you need to. I know some groups are looking 5 years out, but often 3 years out because you just really don't know. And things are often shifting. And so the prep time looks like maybe a month, it could be a month, maybe two, depending on the timing of the group. And then the meat of the work really happens in about 2.5 days, ideally in person, but certainly can be done virtually. And then maybe a week or two later, some time to do that focused implementation. So all in all, I think 3 months or less. I mean, I've done them in two, I've done them in a month.
Right.
You can have a strategic plan.
Folks just in chat, Kim Allen says, I really appreciate the spiral. It resonates with me as it captures the circular patterns in our lives and relationships. And Donna shared this could be a personal roadmap as well.
It,
Um, and
it's
Titus,
funny you say
go,
that.
let
Um,
me go ahead, Rhonda. I
I
just
was
want
just
to cue up Titus. I want you to show our kind of our arrows, but Rhonda, back to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's funny, Donna, that you say that because I've done this personally for myself, like a personal strategic plan. And in 2026, we'll start doing individual retreats for folks to use this a similar framework to do a personal strategic plan.
Oh, that's so cool. Andrea, I see your hand up. So, do you have a question for Rhonda?
I do, Rhonda. Thank you so much. This was really exciting. I loved how the slides were brief and straight, straight to the point. I love this model. I'm curious because I do similar work and I work a lot with theory of change and logic models. And I'm curious as to whether you find those useful or if people get caught in the wordsmithing and, the tool.
Yeah, I've done strategic planning with other folks. I've partnered with other folks who do strategic planning in a bit more traditional way. And I think sometimes folks can get caught up on that language, but it also depends on where you are as a team and what you really need as an organization, right? Are you really trying to change how you do everything? Are you changing your mission and vision and your approach to work? Or are those things mostly going to stay the same? And you're thinking about what's our roadmap and what does that look like? So I also think it really depends on the purpose of the group. But this particular process, the idea is not to get super caught up on the language. It is to be intentional, but I say all the time, like it's paper and post-its. So you can change it, you can shift it and adjust it as you need to.
Thanks.
I added Rhonda's website, and I love your part where you just say, "Let's chat, let's connect." So there's a really kind of user-friendly connection. Lots of interest in the personal retreats, which I think we're gonna, will be good timing. I think, Andrea, it is interesting you asked that question because part of the process was drilling down to large post-its of 5 to 7 words. And when I tell you we love run-on sentences so that we and that was not really what the goal was. So to come up with 5 to 7 words, and we were constantly kind of broken up into teams, varying people. So, we have a small team of 6, and then we had our board members participate. But we did come up with things that I think we never would have unearthed if we had kind of gone through the what's your mission? What's your vision? What do you believe in? Going through the process kind of had your brain thinking in a different way. So Titus, I don't know if you want to add anything and maybe share kind of where we ended up. And we haven't really shared this publicly, but we thought why not in the 9:30 call just give you a preview of what we're working on.
Yeah, I think you summarized it perfectly by saying like we were actively thinking, writing, generating language throughout the whole process, thanks to Rhonda's guidance and the tool and the methodology. Um, Let me share my screen and bring up just 3 slides. So this is a picture of our team with the post-it notes in the background, which were very helpful. Um, it was also helpful for this to be like hybrid. So we started virtually on Zoom and then we got together for 2 full days in person. And I think that combination worked really well for our team. The question, the strategic plan focus question, we spent a lot of time in the early online sessions with Rhonda. And we came up with this: how might SFC leverage existing resources and staff to grow capacity, to create and implement a clear, abundance-centered plan, and build bridges across Massachusetts early childhood system in order to bring about significant systemic change. So that was like the anchor for everything. And then I'm just going to skip ahead to the arrows. Is this what you wanted, Amy?
Yeah.
So there were interim steps, but the final step was kind of summarizing what we want to do for going forward as strategic directions. And even that language was really helpful for us. What innovative, substantial actions will deal with the underlying contradictions and move us toward our vision? So there's 3 rows here, um, 3 arrows at the end. So centering lived experience and catalyzing change, convening community and organizing ourselves, and releasing the past and launching the future. And so these are all phrases that we came up with in person, using sticky notes and kind of combining. And Rhonda, required us to be succinct. We can't come up with paragraphs. We have to say what we want in 5 to 7 words. And I really like that approach as well.
Um, Ron, anything to add? We skipped from the beginning to the end.
No, I think I mean I love that you're sharing the plan, and that's I mean using this particular process for this, that's exactly what you'll walk away with. You'll have that language, and you as a team or as an individual, an organization, you'll know what that means because you'll have the details, and then can think about how do you want to put that together and tell a specific story from that lens.
We we came up with so many ways of saying. So one of the things we've talked a lot about is we hear so many personal stories, right? The impact of what's happening at the policy level down to like the program, down to a family, down to a child. So one of our frames that we came up was like, how do we move from me to we? So how can we facilitate people's stories and experiences are so important. And we have to think about the bigger we, which can be hard when you're kind of feeling the impact of a policy or a decision. Um, Titus, I'm going to say it. We've also talked about like, are we enabling instead of empowering? And that has we had our meeting with we had our meeting with Rhonda, and the next day we were on a Zoom and we were kind of doing our business as usual. And Titus texted Marissa and I and said, enabling instead of like, so just those shifts have been so powerful for us. Powerful. I think the other thing is you always hear like, don't put it on a shelf. We want it to be a living document. The way that this process is organized, it's so relevant to what you're doing today and not maybe in 30 years. We are also interested in futurism, but I think where we were as an organization, we really needed kind of like a reinvigoration of like what are we trying to do here? So I think even some of those the actionableness of this process has been really and we've been through many different strategic plans and they all have kind of been the right process at the right time. But thinking about where we are now, kind of after a 25-year history and the releasing the past, we feel sometimes we're the holder of the story of the movement in Massachusetts, but we can't kind of get burdened by that. We have to kind of balance that. Rhonda, as people are listening and thinking kind of what's the first step? How do people get started? What's your advice for that?
Yeah. First step, I mean, if absolutely, if you're interested in working with me, you can visit my website. It links directly to my calendar. You can schedule time. We can chat. I'll share, I just have one more slide that I can share just about my overall process,
Great.
and sort of how I connect with and work with folks. So it really starts with just an initial consultation and a conversation. And then I'll develop a proposal based on that. And then we design the agenda together. We design, just as Titus mentioned, we design their questions together, and then we sort of do the work together. And then we wrap up. But of course, always want to keep in touch and keep a continuing relationship. So that's really the flow. So feel free to visit my website. I'll drop I'll drop my email and links in the chat, and would love to have conversations with folks who are interested in working together.
And Rhonda, thank you for answering Natalia's thoughtful question in chat. I appreciate that. And we'll send you the chat as well. And just want to thank you, Rhonda, for all that you are doing, and so exciting for this new part of your chat of your story. And can't wait. We'll continue to work with you and look for opportunities on other projects. But just really want to thank you for joining us this morning and for all the work that you've done. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me. See y'all later.
Thanks, Rhonda. And tomorrow on the 9:30 call, we're going to have sharing the microphone. We have a few people lined up that have some timely updates, but this is a time for folks to kind of come, ask questions, share reflections, get clarifications. And then on Thursday, we're going to hear from the Friends Center for Children in Connecticut that we're going to hear from folks. We've heard about kind of their housing initiative, and we're going to hear from folks who are really impacted by that as well. So we will see you tomorrow on the 9:30 call. Take care. Have a good day.